Hi everyone, I'm Hexperience, and the Indigo Disc DLC has just recently dropped. So today we'll be playing through it, and this video will be my Hexperience with it. The game opens with us getting a call to meet with Clavel at his office, but once we enter the academy, we get jump scared by a perpetually cross-eyed man. His name is Kyrano, and he's the director of Blueberry Academy, the setting for this DLC. We meet up with Clavel and we can now enter the DLC area. We arrive at the school and it's pretty small on the surface, but it's actually mostly underwater. Our next new character, Lacey, shows up and explains that there's a reason for the school to be underwater, but I seriously doubt any explanation that isn't style points. Kyrano reveals that she's one of this school's Elite Four, and then has us fight her. In this DLC, all trainer battles will be double battles, which I think is really cool. We're in a rush to catch a new team, so we just bring in Torkoal and Typhlosion. And Lacey's team does not get to make a single move before it gets wiped from existence. We enter the new area, a giant underwater dome split into 4 areas, and there's an announcement that a class will be starting soon. But we're going to make them delay the class by several hours while we catch every single new Pokemon in sight. We find a Rhydon stuck on an island in the middle of a river, but we decide not to save it. We close out our catching spree by finding my favorite Pokemon, Gloom, and we have ourselves a completely new team. We finally make it to the class, and it's good to see that they waited 4 hours to start just for us. We're tasked with catching an Alolan form Pokemon, and it just so happens that I caught one during the catching spree, so the class we waited hours to attend ends up only being about 2 minutes long. Wonderful. Lacey shows us how to do quests, and then we can head for the middle of the dome, where we get stuck free-falling for eternity. Oh, we escaped. We meet up with Carmine and she challenges us to a battle. She brings in a Mightyena and Toucannon, and we have Rhydon and Zebstrika. Now, there's 2 major advantages for us not evolving our Rhydon into a Rhyperior here. Firstly, we can give Rhydon the Eviolite, boosting its defense and special defense so long as there's another Pokemon it can evolve into. And secondly, the more important reason, is that Rhyperior is just incredibly ugly and I don't want it on my team. We can have Zebstrika use Discharge to hit both of Carmine's Pokemon while Rhydon is immune to it, and then Rhydon can take out Mightyena with a Hammer Arm. Carmine brings in a Scrafty next, and Toucannon goes down to a second Discharge, and we try to take out Scrafty with a Hammer Arm, but thanks to all the attack drops Rhydon has received, we don't get the KO, and we have to swap him out. Carmine brings in her final Pokemon, a Sinistcha, and we swap Rhydon out for Gloom. Zebstrika goes down, and we bring in Magmar to replace it. We're able to whittle away at Sinistcha with Acid Sprays, while Gloom finishes off Scrafty with a Moonblast, and then takes out Sinistcha with a Pollen Puff on the next turn, winning us the fight. Carmine complains that we still don't hold back in battle. Homie, we have been sandbagging literally the entire time I have known you. Just ask Lacey what happened to her team. We then see Kieran, and still angered by the very idea that the world doesn't revolve around him, he's become an even bigger schmuck than before. We then get to meet the next new character, Drayton, an Elite Four member, who asks us to compete against the Pokemon League at the Academy. Carmine calls him out for styling his hair like a tube of Colgate, so he goes to the cafeteria to pout. The rest of the Elite Four walk in, and you can immediately tell what type they use by taking one look at them. Speaking of looking, we discover that Kieran might be legally blind, since it takes him 5 minutes to notice us sitting next to the guy he's talking to. Drayton floats around the idea of us challenging the league, but since we're an exchange student, they aren't sure if we should be allowed to compete. So Drayton calls them all wet blankets and put it to a vote. Lacey betrays us and votes no. The obvious fire trainer votes yes. The obvious steel trainer says no, but Kieran says yes, so we can compete against the league and get our revenge against Lacey. We have to take on a small challenge before each Elite Four member, and would you look at that, I was right about all of the obvious typings. What a shocker. The first of the four we'll be taking on is Crispin, the fire-type trainer. For his challenge, we'll be fighting trainers to get ingredients to make a sandwich, and ours ends up breaking the fabric of reality. Getting right into the fight, he opens with Talonflame and Easy Bake Rotom. And we bring in Seadra and Lapras. Talonflame immediately uses Sunny Day, reducing the power of our water-type moves, and Rotom takes out Seadra with a single Thunderbolt. Lapras hits Rotom with a Hydro Pump, taking out less than half of its HP, and it turns out the Elite Four teams are quite competitive, while our team is less than ideal. We bring in Zebstrika next, and Talonflame hits us hard with a Flare Blitz, nearly taking out Zebstrika before its Citrus Berry heals it up, and Rotom hits it with a Will-O-Wisp, burning it. This drops Zebstrika's attack, causing Talonflame to just barely survive a Supercell Slam. Lapras hits Rotom with another Hydro Pump, and it's brought very low. Talonflame lands another Flare Blitz on Zebstrika, taking it out, but also going down itself due to recoil damage. Rotom hits Lapras hard with an Overheat, wiping out more than half of its HP before going down to a Hyper Voice. Crispin brings in Magmortar and Exeggutor, while we bring in Dodrio. Dodrio moves first and hits Exeggutor with a Lunge for the one-hit KO, while Magmortar uses Heat Wave, taking out Dodrio and leaving Lapras on the brink of death. We land another Hydro Pump, but Magmortar has the Pasho Berry, cutting the power of it, so we don't end up doing a ton of damage. Crispin brings in Camerupt, and we bring out Rhydon. Magmortar lands another Heat Wave, taking out Lapras, and Rhydon gets the revenge kill with Earthquake before Camerupt misses its Heat Wave. We both bring in our final Pokémon, Crispin's Blaziken and our Gloom. We try to have Gloom use Pollen Puff on Rhydon to heal it, but Blaziken terastallizes into a pure Fire type before landing a Focus Blast on Rhydon, taking it out, and Camerupt hits Gloom with an Earth Power, dealing a decent amount of damage. Knowing we're gonna lose, we decide to start using Revive shenanigans. We revive Seadra before Gloom goes down to a Temper Flare. We terastallize Seadra before it gets hit by a Focus Blast from Blaziken. Luckily, we survive and we can land a Surf. Camerupt goes down, but Blaziken ends up surviving, so we need to revive more Pokemon. We get Rhydon and Dodrio back in, and Blaziken lands a Stone Edge on Dodrio, but Dodrio just decides he doesn't feel like dying, and then takes out Blaziken with a Drill Run, winning us the fight. Next, we'll be taking on Amaris, the Steel-type trainer. Her challenge is flying through several rings, and it should be cool, but the flying in this game ends up being the most underwhelming experience ever. For the actual fight, she starts with Skarmory and Alolan Dugtrio, and we bring in Rhydon and Dodrio. We immediately swap out Rhydon for Granbull, whose Intimidate ability drops their attack just before Dugtrio uses Earthquake, which Dodrio and Skarmory are both immune to, and Granbull takes a decent amount of damage. Dodrio, determined to prove itself the superior three-headed Pokemon, hits Dugtrio hard with a Drill Run, which it only survives thanks to its Focus Sash. And Skarmory ends the turn by setting up a Stealth Rock. We swap Granbull out for Golurk, and Dugtrio lands another Earthquake before going down to a Drill Peck from Dodrio, and Skarmory uses Whirlwind, forcing Golurk out and bringing Rhydon back in. Amaris' next Pokemon is Empoleon, so we need to get Rhydon out of there. We swap out for Duraludon as Empoleon hits us with a Hydro Pump, bringing us below half HP before Dodrio hits it hard with a Drill Run. Skarmory then hits Dodrio with a Whirlwind, and Rhydon is brought back in once again. Duraludon outspeeds Empoleon and finishes it with a Thunderbolt before being brought to the red from a Body Press by Skarmory. Rhydon lands a Hammer Arm on Skarmory, but it doesn't do too much damage, and she brings in her Reuniclus next. Duraludon takes out Skarmory with a Thunderbolt before Rhydon lands a Mega Horn on Reuniclus, taking out half of its HP before it can take out Rhydon with an Energy Ball. Next in is her Scizor, and we bring Dodrio back in. Dodrio just misses a KO on Reuniclus with a Lunge before Duraludon hits Scizor decently hard with a Thunderbolt before being taken out itself by a combination of Pounce and Psychic. Golurk is back in, and we're able to outspeed both of her Pokémon. Dodrio finishes Reuniclus with one more Lunge, and Golurk takes out Scizor with a Fire Punch despite its Aqua Berry cutting its power in half. All that's left is her final Pokémon, Metagross, which is terastallized into a pure Steel type, but it never gets to make even a single move, as it's taken out by a combination of Drill Run and Earthquake, winning us the fight. Next up is Drayton, who is surprisingly a Dragon-type trainer, and for his challenge it's just a couple double battles. He's an only Pokemon caught in the dome, so it's really no big deal for us. We do have to take Granbull and Porygon 2 out of our team since they were caught in terror raids, but we're able to quickly finish the challenge. Drayton asks us if we need to change up our team, but we accidentally agree to battle right away. And I was kinda hoping to bring in Granbull and Porygon 2 to this fight, so this kinda sucks. Anyways, he starts with a Dragonite and Flygon, and we bring in Dodrio and Golurk. Dodrio hits Dragonite with a Body Slam for very little damage, and it gets taken out by a single Stone Edge from Flygon. Dragonite hits Golurk hard with an Ice Spinner, taking out more than half of its HP, but Golurk then hits Flygon with an Ice Punch for the one-hit KO. Drayton brings in Sceptile next, and we bring out Seadra, who immediately gets erased from existence by a Leaf Storm from Sceptile. This is why I didn't want to bring him in. And Golurk goes down to another Ice Spinner. What a wonderful start to this. We bring in Duraludon and Lapras next, and Sceptile uses Dragon Cheer, increasing Dragonite's chances of getting critical hits. Duraludon uses Breaking Swipe, dealing a decent amount of damage all around, and lowering the attack of Drayton's Pokémon. Dragonite hits us with an Ice Spinner, which scores a critical hit, but still doesn't do too much damage, and Lapras hits Sceptile with an Ice Beam, barely leaving it alive, but it was holding a weakness policy, so its attacking stats get increased. Sceptile puts this to immediate use by hitting Lapras with a Leaf Storm, but luckily we survive with a decent amount of HP left, and Duraludon lands another Breaking Swipe, further lowering Dragonite's attack, and this time Dragonite's Ice Spinner doesn't get a critical hit, so it barely does any damage. One more Ice Beam from Lapras hits Sceptile, and it goes down. Kingdra comes in next, and it sets up a Rain Dance before being hit by a Breaking Swipe and Ice Beam, being left with about a third of its HP. On the following turn, we use a Hyper Potion on Duraludon before it can take out Kingdra with a Thunderbolt. Dragonite then lands a Thunder Punch on Lapras, getting a critical hit and taking it out. Drayton brings in Haxorus next, and we bring out Rhydon. Haxorus uses Earthquake, which Dragonite is immune to, and it deals a solid amount of damage to both of our Pokémon. Duraludon then lands a Breaking Swipe, taking out Dragonite, and Rhydon's Avalanche takes out Haxorus. Drayton's final Pokémon is Archaludon, which terastallizes into a pure Dragon type. It hits Duraludon with a Dragon Pulse for the KO, and Rhydon lands an Avalanche, taking out about a third of its HP, but also increasing its defense. So, in order to win, we'll be using our revive shenanigans again. We get Golurk and Lapras back on the field, and Golurk freezes our Caledon with an Ice Punch, so Lapras is free to finish it off with an Ice Beam, winning us the fight. The final Elite Four member is Lacey, the Fairy-type trainer. She apologizes for voting no to us taking on the league, but unfortunately for her, I can be a very vindictive person. We don't accept the apology, we blast through the quiz that's her challenge, and we get right to the battle. She starts with Granbull and Whimsicott, and we start with Granbull and Gloom. Lacey's Whimsicott starts by using Light Screen, cutting the damage from our special attacks in half, and we have our Granbull use Growl to lower her Granbull's attack before it hits us with a Play Rough for decent damage. Gloom then hits Whimsicott with a Sludge Bomb, and thanks to its Focus Sash, it survives off of 1 HP. Whimsicott hits Granbull with a Moonblast for a decent bit of damage while we use another Growl. Lacey's Granbull attack is now low enough that its Fire Punch doesn't do a lot of damage to Gloom, and a second Sludge Bomb takes out Whimsicott. Next in is Lucy's Galarian Slowbro. Our Granbull uses Earthquake, dealing a solid amount of damage to every Pokemon on the field, and her Granbull hits Gloom with an Ice Punch, bringing it to just over a third of its HP before we use Giga Drain on Slowbro. And I find out that Galarian Slowbro is not actually a water type, so we barely do any damage. Slowbro then hits our Granbull with a Shell Sidearm for the KO. We bring in Golurk and we swap out Gloom for Dodrio. Slowbro hits Dodrio hard with a Psychic, but we survive and Golurk gets the chance to use Earthquake. Slowbro goes down, but Granbull survives, and it takes out Dodrio with an Ice Punch. We bring in Porygon 2, and Lacey brings in her Primarina. Forgetting about the light screen, we have Porygon 2 use Discharge, which Granbull barely survives, and Primarina lands a Hyper Voice, doing quite a bit of damage to Golurk. And thanks to Primarina holding the Throat Spray, she gets a special attack boost. Golurk then uses Phantom Force, disappearing and causing her Granbull to miss its Ice Punch. Light Screen goes down by the end of the turn, so on the next turn, Discharge ends up doing more damage. It takes out Granbull and paralyzes Primarina, and Golurk finishes it off with Phantom Force. Her final two Pokemon are Alcremie and Excadrill, which is terastallized into a Fairy type before hitting Golurk with a high horsepower for the KO. Porygon 2 lands an Ice Beam on Excadrill, doing a decent bit of damage before we're hit by a Giga Drain. We bring in Gloom next, and it's hit by a high horsepower, but we survive off of 1 HP, and after Porygon 2 and Alcremie throw some attacks back and forth, Gloom takes out Excadrill with a Sludge Bomb. Gloom is taken out on the next turn, but we can bring in Duraludon, who finishes Alcremie with a Steel Beam, winning us the fight, and all that's left is to take on Kieran, the champion. Kieran shows up just to call us slow, even though it's only took us about 2 hours to beat the entire league. Just for that bit of sass, we'll be taking off one of our self-imposed restrictions, that we can only use Pokemon caught in this DLC. The fight starts, and he opens with Dragonite and Politoed, and we bring in Ninetales and Ogerpon, the latter of which Kieran is very salty to see. Ninetales sets up the sun, but Politoed immediately changes it to rain, which isn't great. We swap Ninetales out for Whimsicott, and Ogerpon hits Politoed hard with a Horn Leech, leaving it with barely any HP before it hits Whimsicott with a Weather Ball, taking out about a third of its HP. Dragonite hits Ogerpon with a Hurricane, and we survive off of a single point of HP. Dragonite goes for an extreme speed, but Ogerpon is a filthy cheater and avoids the 100% accuracy move. Whimsicott uses Sunny Day, changing the weather back to being in our favor, and another Horn Leech takes out Politoed. Next in is Porygon Z, and we swap Ogerpon out for Venusaur, who's hit hard by an extreme speed. Whimsicott hits Dragonite with a Moonblast, taking out just under half of its HP, and Porygon Z takes out Whimsicott with a Hyper Beam. We bring in Gloom next, and Porygon Z has to recharge. So Venusaur is free to land a Sludge Bomb on Dragonite, which it barely survives. Gloom sets up a Growth, doubling its attacking stats, and Dragonite lands a Hurricane on Venusaur for the KO. Dodrio is in next, and it takes out Dragonite with a Drill Peck, before being taken out itself by a critical hit Hyper Beam from Porygon Z, who is in turn knocked out by a Giga Drain from Gloom. We bring Ogerpon back in, and Kieran brings out Grimmsnarl and Tony the Tiger. We swap out Ogerpon for Ninetales as Grimmsnarl sets up Reflect, and Gloom hits Grimmsnarl with a Sludge Bomb. But thanks to its Focus Sash, it survives off of 1 HP, but it also gets poisoned. Incineroar hits Ninetales hard with a Flare Blitz, doing a solid amount of damage, but we survive and Grimmsnarl goes down to its poison. Kieran brings in his final Pokemon, a Hydrapple. We then Terrastalize Gloom into a pure Poison type, while Kieran Terrastalizes Hydrapple into a Fighting type. Ninetales hits Incineroar with a Scorching Sands, bringing it below half HP before its Citrus Berry heals it, and Gloom lands a Sludge Bomb on Hydrapple, bringing it down to about a third of its HP. Incineroar then hits Gloom with a Flare Blitz, doing quite a bit of damage, but thanks to us losing the Grass type, we end up surviving. Hydrapple hits Ninetales with an Earth Power for the KO, and we bring in Ogerpon for the final time. Ogerpon hits Incineroar with a Low Sweep, just missing the KO, and Gloom finishes off Hydrapple with a Sludge Bomb. Incineroar takes out Ogerpon with a Flare Blitz, and we're now in a 1v1 situation, but Gloom outspeeds and takes out Incineroar with a Sludge Bomb for the win. Kieran then begins to have a mental breakdown, and Drayton uses this time to taunt Kieran before we all get called off to a classroom. Drayton refuses to stop verbally murdering Kieran, which I'm all for, to be honest. We meet up with Briar, who says she's heading an expedition to Area 0 to find the new legendary Pokemon Terapagos and wants all of us to join. Carmine and Kieran agree to go, but Drayton says he's too lazy and decides to stay behind. Geeta shows up and gives us the titular Indigo Disc, and we head off to the front of the academy to go on the expedition. After we do some side quests. Perrin is here, and this time she wants us to catch 200 Pokemon, which we actually already have. But instead of taking us camping and having us do a mini game to find a unique new Pokemon, she just shows us a couple pictures of where to find new legendary Pokemon in Area 0. The place we were going to anyways. So much for doing side quests. We head to the front of the academy where Kieran is acting like a creep again, but Briar has no idea how to read social cues and encourages Kieran's declining mental state before we leave. We arrive at Area 0 and immediately break away from the group to find some new Pokemon. We quickly find Gouging Fire, who we yoink with a Master Ball, and then find Raging Bolt, who also gets yoinked. We reach the bottom of Area 0, where we put the Indigo Disc in a machine, and that's it. That's all the Indigo Disc was used for. It's an elevator key. This DLC could have literally been named anything else and it would have been more fitting. The Underwater Earth, the Crystal Mystery, the Strabismus School. All more fitting names. We take an elevator down to the lower part of Area 0 and find a note talking about the Stellar Terra typing, one that's supposed to have the power of every type. Now, if a Pokemon had every single type combined, its only weakness would be Rock. So we switch Ogerpon to a Rock type, and when we find a Glamora with the stellar Terra typing, we bonk it, and it's not super effective. My disappointment is immeasurable, and my day is ruined. We make our way through the tunnels, find some fancy tree with a Minecraft monster guarding it, and we quickly reach the bottom. Kieran proceeds to lose his mind and scream, but Briar pretends she didn't hear Kieran going on this rant and encourages him to wake up Terapagos. Kieran then yoinks Terapagos and claims that with his very own legendary Pokémon, he can finally beat us. Granbull proceeds to punch his colorful tortoise into submission, winning us the fight. Briar then tells Kieran to terrastalize Terapagos, but when he does, it goes out of control and breaks the Pokeball. So we get into an extended battle with it that ends with Venusaur annihilating Terapagos and us yoinking Kieran's Pokemon. We head back to the academy, where Kieran once again apologizes to us for being an absolute buffoon, and while the game forces us to accept his apology, in reality, I just really want to make fun of him for getting 0 legendary Pokemon like he wanted, while we walk away with 3 new ones. The credits roll, but there's still a couple more things to do. Briar gives us access to the Stellar Terra type, and removes the 1 terastallization per Pokemon Center visit cap. We try synchronizing with our Pokemon, which is pretty alright. We unlock the ability to fly at any time, and while it's still incredibly underwhelming, it is very useful. We fly to the top of the giant disco ball in the sky, and there's actually some pretty good items up here. We find this NPC named Snacksworth, who lets us find multiple legendary Pokemon like Groudon, yoink, and Latios, yoink. Kieran's gonna be really happy to learn that we caught even more legendaries. We can also bring Terapagos to Kitakami, where we get a special interaction that lets us talk to Professor Seda again. We try to tell Arvin that we talked with his dead mother again, but he won't stop complaining about not being special. Alright, don't listen to me. Well, that's about all I've found to do in the DLC so far. Early on in the next year, there should be another update, but unless there's a lot to it, I may or may not discuss it. The Switch really struggles with this DLC sometimes, and a lot of the new features feel lesser than what they could have and should have been. I really enjoyed the setting and characters though, and I think double battles are vastly more interesting than single battles. So overall, I enjoyed this experience. Anyways, I've been Hextasy. Thanks for watching.